Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Hamilton. I'm the Chief Executive of Belfast Chamber, and you're very welcome to this morning's Belfast Business Briefing. The focus of today's event is very simple. It's on what is the busiest, most important trading period traditionally in our city, and that's, of course, Christmas. We are delighted to be joined for today's briefing by John Greer, who is the Director of Economic Development at Belfast City Council, and also by Emer Henry, who is Senior Manager for Culture and Tourism at the Council. And in a few seconds, I'm going to hand over to them. They're going to run through a presentation of the Council's extensive and ambitious plans for the Christmas period, a period which is, of course, going to be more important than ever this year. And just before I do so, I want to just obviously thank you all for attending, and also to point out that there is a question and answer function available. If anything that John or Emer says interests you and you want to find out a little bit more, please put a question into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to say a few words of introduction, and before handing over to Emer for the presentation. John.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks to your members for the opportunity this morning to come in and tell you about our plans for Christmas. We're acutely aware that businesses right across the city have had a very difficult period of trading with the impact of COVID-19, and those impacts continue. And we're acutely aware that footfall in the city is still significantly down on pre-COVID levels, due to a range of factors, not least the fact that a lot of businesses are still asking staff to work from home if they can. But we realise that this Christmas, unlike last Christmas, we have an opportunity to return some of that footfall to the city centre, and that's a real focus for what we're doing. And to do that, Emer Henry and her team have architected a very ambitious plan that involves animation and a range of activities in the city centre that is going to attempt to attract people back to the city centre, not just residents of Belfast, but residents from right across the island of Ireland. We are also delighted that, unlike last year, our Christmas market is going ahead, and we think that will add a great deal of vibrancy to the city centre. But without further ado, I would like to invite Emer Henry to tell you about those plans. As Sam said, Emer is our Senior Manager for Culture and Tourism in the Council, and as I said, she is the creative genius behind all of these plans, and a lot of what you're going to see in the city centre going forward is under Emer's direction. So over to you, Emer. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So yes, if you bear with me, I'm just going to run through a brief presentation to give an outline of our proposed plans. And as Simon says, obviously happy to take any questions if there is anything that you want a little bit more information on or clarity on. So we are acutely aware within Council of the challenges as we approach Christmas 2021, and that there is a real need for it to really signal a return to greater vibrancy within the city centre in particular, and hopefully to change some of those behaviours that have become a little bit cemented during COVID in terms of shopping in the city centre and a return to events and social activities in the city centre. So we are hopeful that Christmas will very much kind of support a return to some of the activities that would have been normal in the city pre-COVID. So as the city continues to recover, the aim of the seasonal activity that we're presenting is obviously specifically and first and foremost to support businesses and to support that return of footfall. In doing so, that will deliver direct economic benefit to the city and to the city centre. But there are also wider, longer term benefits that obviously work in tandem with that strong economic focus, which is an improvement in the cultural vibrancy of the city, and obviously the overall experience that sits around retail and hospitality, but also to ensure that the experience of Belfast city centre is in keeping with the Belfast brand and how we want to position the Belfast brand in Belfast as a city. Also at that local level, it fosters a real civic pride in the city and a return of residents into the city centre, and also presents a really important opportunity to support homegrown local culture, arts and events sectors. And the plan that we will present will result in quite significant employment for a number of local suppliers, and in particular the creative sector. So really, what do we want to achieve? We have come up with this idea that Christmas 2021 should be once upon a time in Belfast. That is not about looking backwards, it's very much about looking forwards into a contemporary city, but also to recognise that along with that kind of contemporary city experience, Christmas automatically conjures up feelings of warmth and comfort and familiar. And I think that those are all things that people are quite keen to feel and experience as we do recover from the pandemic. So it is about recognising what are those real USPs in terms of Belfast Christmas offer. As John has mentioned, there will be the return of the Christmas market at City Hall with the necessary safety measures in place. We also want to offer and support that really strong high street and independent retail offer. The fact that Belfast has quite a unique seasonal cultural entertainment offer, and a reputation in terms of short breaks over the Christmas period, and a really strong hospitality offer that sets us apart in terms of the wider regional offer. And in doing so, it's those three elements. Firstly, about encouraging residents back into the city centre, also to ensure that we are appealing to domestic visitors right across Northern Ireland and to get them back into Belfast, and also to reinforce to domestic visitors in particular that spending local does indeed include spending in your capital city. And obviously the return of the city breaker in terms of the ROI and GB market. And we will be working with colleagues in Visit Belfast and Tourism NI to ensure that we are marketing the city in order to secure those out-of-state visitors. So we feel that cultural animation and creative interventions are a really important part of doing that. They play a significant role in that idea of creating an authentic experience in the city, and that the city experience is about how retail, hospitality and culture all come together, and that when we then market the city, we can market that authentic experience. And as I say, for us, we're going to build the programme this year around that theme of Once Upon a Time in Belfast. The reason why we specifically went for a theme is because we are keen that the offer in the city centre over the Christmas period is as connected as possible. Quite often there's a lot of really good activity that happens, but sometimes that activity doesn't necessarily have the visibility or coherence that it should have. So the idea of City Council working with partners under a theme is an attempt to kind of pull together that golden thread so that there is consistency in what the festive season in Belfast looks like, sounds like, feels like, in terms of your on the ground experience, and how that's then carried through into marketing and communication campaigns. So it's all about this idea of a city of stories. We feel that Belfast has a really unique story to tell, that story is unique both in the context of differentiating us from the rest of the regional offer, but also in terms of our position on these islands. And then just in really simple ways, how do we ensure that that's applied through all of our creative treatments? And the types of things that we do is around things like a use of a consistent colour palette. And in the use of the colour palette, what we are doing is we're taking some of those traditional colours associated with Christmas, and we're just giving those a little bit of a contemporary edge, which is why you will see, for example, a magenta replacing the kind of traditional use of red at Christmas. So it is very much Christmas as we all know it, but just with that contemporary twist. So what does our programme include? There are a number of kind of pillars to the programme. Clearly, the main pillar is the opening weekend, which will signal the beginning of the Christmas season officially in the city. Obviously, some of our partners working in retail launched their Christmas season just before that. But in terms of City Council and how we work with a number of the other partners, that opening weekend is the 20th, 21st of November. That will coincide with the return of the Christmas market. So the Christmas market opens in the grounds of City Hall on 20th of November. It will also coincide with the turning on of the lighting scheme. This will be year 2 of the city's new lighting scheme. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then that will move us into a period of more sustained programming. So we will have street animation on the ground every weekend between the 20th of November right up until Christmas. We will also have a Belfast music programme on the ground throughout the city centre over that period. There will be window dressing, and that obviously is all complemented by the marketing campaigns. And I'll talk about a little bit about those marketing campaigns. There's really 2 strands to those campaigns. One is that led by Belfast City Council directly, and obviously the other one is that delivered by our partner in Visit Belfast. So the lighting scheme will turn on the 20th of November. We launched a new lighting scheme last year. We have taken on board where we could feedback from retail hospitality traders in the city on that scheme, and where possible, we have sought to address some of the gaps that were identified last year. I think those gaps were just a natural result of transferring from multiple schemes into one core scheme. So, for example, one of the areas that has been addressed is the absence of lighting last year on Ann Street. So we will be reinstating the lighting scheme in Ann Street, just to ensure that there's that kind of connectivity through the retail core. And there are a couple of other areas where we have been able to put up some cross features this year that weren't available last year because of issues to do with demolition and lack of locations to be able to obviously fix those major cross features too. So hopefully you will see what we think was a really well received scheme last year, but you will see improvements where we could. And then moving into the main opening weekend. So the main opening weekend is a series of enchanted evenings. Again, this is in consultation with the retail sector, where what we have sought to do is take that kind of core Saturday, Sunday opening weekend and complement the shopping period, then obviously encouraging people to come into the city and stay in the city. And so our animation is going to focus in that kind of evening into kind of nighttime economy period, and hopefully again getting people to then stay on later into the evening in the city. And we did deliberately make that decision to do it in terms of those timings, to obviously kind of complement rather than compete with what will be an important weekend in terms of shopping and retail. So it will kick off at 6:30 on Saturday the 20th, and then it will be repeated again on Sunday the 21st. That will result in the pedestrianisation of Royal Avenue. So Royal Avenue will be closed to traffic during that period. And what we will then be able to do is run a series of programme initiatives with major light installations and projections along Royal Avenue, including, for example, the old Tesco bank building, right beside the Primark bank building, and a number of other heritage sites. So it will run from starting at City Hall the whole way down to the Bank of Ireland building on the corner of North Street. Sorry, I'm just having a wee issue with my computer here. If you give me 1 wee second, I need to add in some credentials here in order to keep going. So Lighting Projections is one of the main strands of that programme over that weekend. There will also be on street theatre and street performance. And again, that will all be in the theme of Once Upon a Time. So it will all be kind of magical, fairy tale-esque scenes. So scenes from some very kind of recognisable fairy tales. And then that will be complemented by musical performances. Those musical performances will be pop-up musical performances on the street, and then also in a number of locations right across the city centre. So this kind of gives you an outline of the types of activity and the locations that will be popping up over the 20th and 21st. And you will see that there's a real kind of critical mass of activity. The idea here is that it naturally creates a trail. So you should be able to naturally start at City Hall and work your way right through the retail core of the city, and obviously then the ancillary routes off Royal Avenue, but equally you should be able to come upon any single element of it, and the experience that you will get will stand up on its own. And in terms of if you were to do the entire experience, we're estimating that it would take about 90 minutes to 2 hours to really experience the full breadth of activity that's on offer over those 2 evenings. There will be variation in the Saturday and Sunday, so if you were to come back again for a second evening, it will present something different for you to experience. Then, as I mentioned, Belfast Christmas Market opens on the 20th. It will run right through to the 23rd of December. There are going to be some safety measures put in place in terms of evidence required to enter the Christmas market. And that will obviously be widely advertised on social media channels so people know what to expect. It will be the usual opening hours in terms of Monday to Wednesday, and then extend it on Thursday through to Saturday, with then a Sunday afternoon on offer. Then, as I'd mentioned, we're going to do pop-up street entertainment the whole way through the season, focusing on Saturdays and Sundays, just to ensure that in addition to the retail offer and the hospitality offer on Saturday and Sundays afternoons, there's just that additional experience to really create a little bit of vibrancy in the city centre, and to create more of a Christmas experience when you're in the city. So that will be the usual pop-up entertainment. By and large, we are working all with local acts. There are a few UK-wide acts that are being brought into the city, but we really wanted to use it as an opportunity to support as much local talent as possible. And then I've mentioned the Belfast Music Programme. So there will be a series of music events in a number of locations right across the city centre. Some of those will be pop-up in public spaces. Some of those will be ticketed events with partner organisations and partner venues, but it is really just to get a sense of that kind of music city. And we are hoping to hear this week whether or not Belfast has been successful in its bid to become a UNESCO City of Music. So for us to formally get a City of Music designation. And if we're successful in that, obviously we will be doing quite a lot of press around that. And then the Christmas music programme will obviously build on that and complement that. We are also trying to create a little bit of the kind of busking in the city. I know that the people have different opinions on this. Some people are really supportive of busking. Some people feel that it does need to be curated or controlled more. We have ran this event previously over the summertime, and it was really successful in terms of just giving a little bit of focus and quality control to some of the busking that's happening in the city centre. So we're bringing it back for a special Christmas edition on the 4th of December. And again, it's just something that tends to get good social media and wider media coverage, and is obviously an opportunity for us to support some of our up and coming local acts. In addition to that, we will also be releasing a Belfast Christmas album. We had recorded Belfast Christmas album last year, which was a series of local artists really doing kind of covers and new versions of a number of Christmas favourites, but we hadn't really had an opportunity to work with some of our partners to roll that out because of obviously the very specific circumstances of last year. So we are going to bring that back this year, and there will be a special gig concert in the city centre to celebrate that album with a series of live performances. We're also looking at window dressing. We are kind of focusing our efforts in window dressing specifically through two initiatives. One is in that opening weekend on the 20th, 21st, we're going to be working with some of the bigger businesses down Royal Avenue to do live installations in windows across those 2 evenings. So you will see performances in windows as kind of live installations. But then on a more sustained basis right across the Christmas season, we are focusing our efforts on that area of vacancy along Royal Avenue, just across and further down from opposite Castlecourt. So we are focusing on where Premier People previously had been, the old Greg's Bravissimo shoe units, because we felt that that was a specific area that needed particular attention, and obviously was going to affect the overall kind of feel and vibrancy of the city over the Christmas period. So we've been working in particular with two companies, Big Telly and Arts Actor. Big Telly are going to occupy one of those vacant premises to create an elf factory. So it is going to be a kind of public venue that families can attend, and then in addition to that they are going to be doing a window installation, and then we've been working with Arts Actor on a series of other window installations along that stretch. So again, we just felt that it was really important to specifically address that part of the retail core. And then finally, just to finish up before we take any questions, as I mentioned, there are two elements to the marketing campaign. One is that led by Belfast City Council, where we will be reaching out to neighbouring areas, very much trying to reinforce two messages. One, that the Belfast offer is quite distinctive from the offer in the rest of Northern Ireland, but despite it being distinctive, it is still very much local. And so when you support Belfast, you are still supporting local retail and spending locally, and that is a really important message for us to reinforce. So we'll be reaching out to those areas and in particular obviously pushing our own initiatives and pushing the whole animation and Christmas experience that visitors can expect in Belfast. And then in addition to that kind of immediate campaign run by Belfast City Council, there will be the wider campaign from Visit Belfast, which we are directly supporting, which will obviously have that reach right across Northern Ireland and targeted into Republic of Ireland markets. And we are obviously working with Visit Belfast in terms of what the look and feel and specifics of that campaign will be. But needless to say, I think both Council and Visit Belfast very much recognise that one of the key challenges for Belfast is our positioning in a crowded market. So we are confident that we have a really good product, that we have a really good city centre experience, but it's ensuring that we're communicating that unique experience, and we are convincing people to come right in and spend in our city centre and indeed beyond. So that's really all from us. Myself or John are happy to take any specific questions on anything you've just heard.
Emer, thank you very much for that. That was very comprehensive, very exciting as well, and it's the beginning of November, but it's not far off before this is going to kick off. But I know that there's been a huge amount of work going on in this one, well out of season and well before the Christmas period. So thank you for all of that. I think everybody who's who's watching will appreciate the amount of effort that has been put in, and the fact that it is quite an ambitious program. So thank you for that. Can maybe there are quite a few questions already in. If anybody wants to ask any more specific ones, please put them into the question and answer function. We'll get through a few of them before we conclude. But maybe I could kick off by just, so there's, I think it's interesting. It's an opening weekend the way it's been styled, so there's no big switch on event, and I think everybody understands why that's the case, and that might be something that comes back in the longer term. But I suppose the important thing is that there is a sense that, or anybody who is in the city on the 20th or 21st of this month, later in this month, there is a sense that it is different. There's something happening. There's a lot of activity happening in different places. And whilst you might not have that focus and the tree outside City Hall, there's a lot of stuff happening. And I think, is that the type of feel that you're trying to go for? And is that something that you maybe see happening in the longer term, even beyond the current restrictions?
I think, yes. I mean, we've we have looked at what other cities have done. We've obviously taken feedback, both in terms of visitor on the ground feedback in previous years, and obviously feedback from retail hospitality colleagues. And we do feel that that's the general direction that cities are moving in. Simon, that we're moving away from that big set piece that bring people in for a very specific period of time, and then they kind of quickly depart the city. And so obviously what COVID made us think of is a way of kind of staggering that in a more consistent flow of increased footfall over a longer period of time. And for us, we think that there's real benefits to that. So it's not in any way decreasing the ambition. So we actually hope that it will be a better quality of experience that people will have, but that quality of experience will be sustained over a longer period of time. It obviously allows us to pedestrianise the city centre, but at a time that isn't directly going to negatively impact retail. So it's very much creating a core experience, but kind of pulling that core experience through the city centre, rather than just that one moment in time at City Hall, which, to be honest, even from a crowd control perspective before COVID, was quite challenging for the city to try to manage, and didn't necessarily always result in the quality of Christmas experience that we were obviously going for.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add to that.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so as Emer has pointed out, this is a product of significant interaction with businesses and stakeholders. And the traditional Christmas light switch on, as Emer said, is something that cities are moving away from, because the evidence suggests it doesn't create a significant economic benefit for those city traders. People go to the event and they leave, and sometimes the legacy of that is issues with parking, crowd control, and so on that Emer has mentioned. And everything that we're trying to do with this campaign is really about ensuring there is a direct economic benefit to those activities in the city centre. So I think going forward, unless the evidence base suggests a need for a change, we will continue to try and distribute these activities around the city. I noticed that there's a question on how we can attract older people to the city centre. Obviously, large events like that don't serve all of those demographics well in terms of accessibility. And everything with this campaign is attempting to attract all demographics to the people and spread that demand across the full time window in the city. And to the specifics of that question, there was a question around a public gallery and so on. And we have several projects underway in line with that. So we're confident that there will be attractions in the city that appeal to the particular characteristics of that demographic across the city, because we want the city to be accessible for all.
Thanks, John. I think it's great that both you, John, and you, Emer, have emphasised throughout this that the whole I suppose the overarching purpose is to celebrate Christmas and show the city at its best, but it is also about boosting footfall and helping business in the city too. And I think out of necessity, probably landed on an opening weekend rather than an opening sort of couple of hours. And you're right, it wasn't universally enjoyed by businesses in the city centre, as many sort of certainly reported to us that, you know, footfall started to dip well in advance of the big switch on and didn't really pick up. So I think that this will be interesting to see whether out of necessity we actually land on something that is much more beneficial in the longer term. Can I touch on the Christmas market? And obviously huge amount of disappointment last year when it couldn't happen, huge amount of interest this year when it was announced that it was coming back. And whilst I think we understand that not everybody thinks the Christmas market is the best, I'm very much in the opposite camp of that. But maybe it's worth again just sort of going through the economic benefits that it brings, the numbers of people that it brings to Belfast, that it is a unique selling point for the city that really nowhere else in the island is able to do at the scale that Belfast is. And maybe you could talk through some of those, you touched on some of the restrictions that are there, Emer, but you know, will we fundamentally be experiencing the same sort of Christmas market with the same sort of traders, the same sort of experience as it would be in any other year, obviously with certain restrictions in place?
Yeah, I mean, certainly our understanding is that the kind of mix and diversity of traders at the market will be very similar to what we are all used to. I mean, I think that there are some new traders that have been introduced, but if anything, that's going to improve the quality of the experience. At the moment, the restrictions that we have been notified of, that they are going to ask for proof of vaccination or a negative lateral flow test. But actually that's to ensure that we can safely get the numbers into the market that ensures all the things that you've just outlined there, Simon, in terms of the economic return, but also a market by its very nature requires that kind of buzz of people, I think, to create that experience. So you know, that requirement we think is a positive thing, because I think that we would rather have that requirement and the market be as close to the market that we're all used to than not have that requirement, but in some way then have a lesser market as a result in terms of other forms of restrictions. But certainly from our perspective in council, it should be very much the Christmas market that hopefully most of us have enjoyed in previous years.
Apologies, I was muted there, and it's still in excess of a million visitors come to the market every year. So, you know, again, whether people think it's the best thing or not, you know, that's a huge number of people, many of whom are drawn from well outside of Belfast. So, you know, having that at the center of the Christmas program is pretty important in terms of drawing in visitors into the city and hopefully parting them with some of their cash.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add, Simon. So each year we have a company that do an independent assessment of the Christmas market, and it consistently attracts more than 1.5 million people to the city. And consistently, it's over 30% of those people are actually outside of Greater Belfast. So even when we look at the data in terms of our marketing campaigns, it is one of our most effective tools for bringing new spend to the city centre. Now, we're very aware that the market does create some mixed views from both consumers and businesses in the city centre. This is the last year that we're under contract with the existing provider. So we will be taking a little bit of time and doing a review, looking at best practice in other cities to see how we might improve or change a Christmas market experience ahead of going out to the market in 2022.
Thanks, John. You can also touch on the lighting scheme. There was a new lighting scheme introduced last year. I appreciate that maybe not everybody got to see those given the way things were last year, but I think they were, you know, a huge improvement and some really good feature lights in key locations. And you mentioned earlier there was some gaps, and Elm Street was one of those that was mentioned, but you know, that's being filled in. And is this I suppose an evolving process with the Christmas lights, that we're going to see new ones and additional streets over a period of the next number of years?
So at the moment, what we did a kind of initial mapping for the new scheme, and obviously the budget for that has been set for a kind of 3-year period. So we're in year 2 of 3. Within that, obviously, we were going out with a new creative approach. We wanted some of the features to be more kind of distinctly Belfast, which is why you'll see, for example, the starburst replicated in some of them. And we did really want the scheme to kind of represent the fact that we're a capital city and complement the lighting scheme at City Hall. In terms of kind of growth potential, what will happen is then next year we will obviously review the success of that scheme, and we will do a more kind of comprehensive audit, Simon, in terms of where some of those gaps are, and then that will be taken into consideration when we then go back out to the market for the next period of time, which is likely to be a kind of further 3 years. So really what we're doing this year and next year is we're trying to be pragmatic in filling what we think are kind of critical gaps in relation to the retail core. We don't yet have a longer term plan in terms of how that might extend further, and understandably, council does come under pressure in terms of lighting in relation to arterial routes. I think what we would like is, Belfast City Council did launch a lighting strategy last year. What we would like is we would like to be able to look at it more in the round, so that the Christmas lighting scheme is enhancing the overall lighting in the city and in the city centre. And again, that's a direction of travel that other cities have gone down, to look at actually how you're using lighting 12 months of the year to animate the city, and then your Christmas lights should just be a layer over that rather than Christmas lights being everything. So I think we are keen to look at investing in that kind of year-round piece, because we feel that lighting is critical, not just in terms of cultural vibrancy, but also, for example, in terms of kind of public safety, and as a creative way that you can address some of the issues that we have in the city centre. So it's looking at all of that in the round, but certainly this year we've made some improvements. Next year we would intend to make further improvements, and then it's kind of building that longer term picture.
Thanks, Emer. I think the lights last year looked really well. I thought that City Hall was brilliant. I thought some of those Belfast themed lights as well were particularly special, and it maybe leads on to a question from David, who's a trader up in Gresham Street. And there's always that challenge with limited resources, I suppose, and concentrating on those and on your main established shopping streets. But then there's also streets that are just a little bit outside of those. And you mentioned that kind of keep this under review in the longer term, but that wider lighting strategy, that's a part of the city, the north end of the city centre, which is hopefully going to see a lot of investment, not least from the council over the next number of years. So it's an up and coming area, and is that sort of wider lighting strategy within some Christmas lights type on top of the sort of thing that you might want to see over the next number of years in places like that?
So maybe if I answer that. So the short answer is yes. I do have to say that city lighting is actually surprisingly complicated and extraordinarily expensive. And also we have to think, as it's very pertinent a minute with COP26, about the implications around sustainability for the city. And that's why we've done a piece of work, which is how we look at lighting the city in the long term. Now that covers all parts of the central business district, including Gresham Street. If you look at, for instance, the City Hall as a prime example, because the City Hall has a permanent lighting installation, which easily converts to focus on attention around key dates such as Christmas or so on. And as Emer has already said, that's really what we want to move to in the future for the city, is some type of permanent lighting installation that can then be manipulated on key dates. There will always be a need to supplement that with specific lighting installations, but we're very much focused on that luminous city lighting strategy and how we may implement that. And we are working with partners such as DFC and DFI on that, because a lot of this comes down to ownership and management of assets that quite often are not directly under council management. And that's one of the challenges that we consistently have with lighting.
Thanks, John. I maybe just ask one final question then before I let you both go. And it's around that point around a consistency and a theme, a golden thread. I think you described it as, Emer. And you know, I think that, you know, Belfast has long had a very strong Christmas product, and I think it does have, and I think, you know, the market, as I mentioned, exemplifies this, where we've got the beautiful setting of City Hall that other cities would give their right arm for. The market enhances that, it attracts that 1.5 million people, and then the benefit for the wider city businesses as a result of all of that. And once we've had that strong product, it has been maybe a little bit sort of disparate in the past, and you know, clearly you're putting a lot of effort into trying to stitch that together to get a very strong, a much stronger, more coherent product that it doesn't matter what part of the city centre you're in, you're going to see something that is linked back to that theme. And again, you know, this is maybe the first year that we've seen that done in reality. So, you know, but again, it's something I'm sure that you want to see continue over the next number of years as well, and where we get a huge amount of buy-in from everybody in the city, and that goes right down to individual businesses, and you know, businesses have their own, for example, our window displays might be quite, you know, consistent right across their group of their chain, but that's something that, you know, you want to encourage, and we're happy to help direct anybody to you guys in terms of, you know, how can they get on board with this theme this year and also in the future as well. So, you know, just maybe want to say something about just how important that is in terms of just developing a strong product, but also marketing that then, and marketing Belfast as a place to come over this period.
I think there's real long-term ambitions around that, Simon. I think this is the kind of first year that council has been able to pull it together in terms of a more cohesive approach. But I think going forward, we would like to increase the lead-in times where psychologically the city's in a different place. Hopefully next year and year after, so we can start working with partners in the city much earlier to look at how do we kind of build one city experience with many delivery partners on the ground. But we certainly, what we are hoping to do this year is to start that process. So where there is anyone that is keen to get on board, there's absolutely ways that we can provide direct support, especially around, for example, the music elements or the window dressing elements. There are, you know, there are colleagues in council that can facilitate some of that, and we're working with a number of partners, but we'd love to be able to work with more partners. So we'd be really keen to take you up on your offer of facilitating that and supporting us in that. But certainly I think our big ambition is that we are moving ahead with plans for a series of international programs across 2023 and 2024, in keeping with other bigger programs that's planned in relation to GB in Ireland. So what we would hope is that by 2023 we would have entirely transformed the kind of Christmas experience, so that product that you've just talked about is really celebrated, and that strong Belfast product is represented in a really coherent way right across the experience, but also then in terms of our marketing and communications plan, it is about everything being joined up. So it's that kind of core Belfast experience that we are not just marketing, but that we're delivering on the ground. But this year is certainly our attempt at starting that process. But we would be really hopeful that, you know, come 23, 24, our ambition is that Belfast would have a Christmas experience to rival any Christmas experience, not just in GB and Ireland, but indeed in terms of European Christmas experiences.
Thanks, Emer. You know, I think that's a really, really important point. You know, I think that this is not, you know, just about, you know, turning a Christmas tree on a few lights. It's actually about, you know, how we position and market the city more generally. And you know, Christmas is obviously a big, hugely important trading period for many of those who are listening. But I think it's also particularly important this year, given the difficulties that people have had. But I think that injecting that sort of strong cultural element into it too, so that it enhances the overall product and allows us to shine as a city and spotlight those things and showcase those things that we're really good at. So thank you for that. Thank you as well for the work on the UNESCO City of Music status, and hopefully we hear some good news on that. Can I thank John and Emer for their time this morning, for the presentation, and for all of the effort that has gone in behind that to make all of those points a reality. I think I'm sitting here struggling with the sun. I think Emer is as well. It feels like we're talking about this in the middle of the summer and not just a couple of weeks away from this becoming a reality, but we're all looking forward to seeing the Christmas market back, to seeing those lights going up and getting switched on, to see that animation every weekend, and just to seeing Belfast bouncing back after what has been a tough year, and hopefully a great Christmas period and beyond. So thank you, John. Thank you, Emer, for your time this morning, and thank you for all the effort that you and your team have put into doing this. I know that there might be other questions that people have around some of the issues that have been raised. So if they want to direct them through to us at Belfast Chamber, we're happy to pass them on to John and Emer, or they can go directly to the team at the council. But just leaves it to me to once again thank John and Emer, thank everybody for attending, and thank Neil Dazel and the team at Plan for helping make this morning possible. Please go to our website, belfastchamber.com. There are some more events in our events calendar which you might want to sign up to and attend as well. So look forward to seeing you perhaps at one of those in the not too distant future. But again, thank you to John, thank you to Emer, thank you to the council for their ambitious programme, and we're looking forward to a really successful Christmas 2021. Thank you.
Thank you all.